Most people don't realize they're trapped in a victim mindset. They think speaking up loudly makes them strong. They think complaining about unfairness gives them power. But here's the harsh truth. The world doesn't respect pain. It obeys presence. Power comes not from what happens to you, but how you choose to see it, use it, and rise from it. This video will show you how to think like a leader, not someone who reacts to chaos, but someone who commands it. Using timeless Stoic wisdom and Machiavellian strategy, you'll learn to control perception, master emotion, and turn misfortune into momentum. Because a leader doesn't beg for fairness. They shape outcomes. If you're tired of overreacting, over-explaining, and feeling powerless, like and subscribe now. This isn't motivation, it's transformation, and it begins the moment you stop waiting and start leading.
Number 1.
Control perception over reality. Power doesn't begin with truth, it begins with perception. A real leader understands this instinctively. They know the world does not operate on objective fairness. It responds to what appears confident, clear, and in control. You could be deeply wise, highly capable, and morally upright. But if you show up looking uncertain or emotionally scattered, people will treat you as such. Likewise, even when everything around you is crumbling, if you move with composure and measured speech, the world often grants you space, trust, and influence. Because the way you show up sets the tone for how others interact with you. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, lived through endless loss. He buried children, managed plague outbreaks, and carried the weight of an empire. But he never demanded sympathy. In his private writings, meditations, we see his fatigue, his grief, his weariness. But in public, he radiated steadiness. He didn't weaponize his pain. He refined it, not to hide it, but to use it properly. The Stoics believed deeply in this. You are responsible for your expression, even when you are not responsible for your circumstances. That's the difference between reacting and leading. Machiavelli echoed this wisdom when he said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Most people won't dive into your soul. They'll judge your face, your tone, your posture. And in that instant, they decide whether to respect you, ignore you, or control you. That's not fair, but it is real. And leaders don't complain about reality, they use it. This is why leaders care about presence. They don't try to look perfect. They try to look intentional. They ask, what does my energy signal to others? Not because they're vain, but because they know energy is contagious. Confidence spreads, doubt spreads faster. Consider Frida Kahlo. Her physical body was wrecked by a traumatic accident. She endured betrayal in love and the agony of repeated surgeries. Yet in every photograph, every painting, she exuded fire. Her eyes were steady, her clothes bold and sovereign. She wasn't hiding her suffering. She was shaping how the world saw it. She took control of perception, and that gave her leverage. She became a force, not a victim of circumstance. The Stoics taught that you cannot control what others think, but you can control what you give them to interpret. Epictetus once said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our opinion about things." But modern leaders might rephrase that. It's not what happens to you that defines your power, it's what people see you do with it. Now compare this with the victim mindset. A victim leads with pain. They expect their suffering to be a shield. They believe the world should accommodate their story. But the world rarely does. In fact, when pain is presented without purpose, people turn away, not always from cruelty, but from confusion. We are wired to follow clarity, to move towards strength. If someone constantly complains, vents, or begs for sympathy, it trains others to lower expectations, or even to walk away. This is not a call to fake strength, it's a call to direct strength. to feel fully but express wisely. You don't owe the world your breakdowns. You owe yourself composure, especially when it's hardest. That's when perception becomes power. Leadership means thinking before speaking, standing before collapsing, breathing before reacting. Because how you show up in adversity teaches others what you are made of and what they can expect from you. And once they decide you're strong, they treat you with greater seriousness. It's not about performance, it's about projection. And neuroscience supports this. Studies show we form opinions about someone's trustworthiness and capability. Within the first 7 seconds, these impressions, whether accurate or not, tend to stick. That's why the Stoics emphasized inner stillness that radiates outward. They knew that peace isn't passive, it's persuasive. So how do you apply this? Begin with awareness. Monitor your tone, your posture, your facial expressions. Ask yourself, what signal am I sending? Are you broadcasting resilience, or are you leaking emotion unconsciously? Are you owning your presence, or waiting for someone to validate it? Even in private life, this matters. If you're going through heartbreak or loss, don't rush to post it online. Pause, reflect, rebuild internally before revealing externally. Why? Because perception is momentum. The more composed you appear, the more power you gain. Not over others, but over your own story. This is why powerful people don't explain themselves endlessly. They don't defend every misunderstanding. They understand the deeper rule. The more you chase approval, the more you lose authority. But the more you embody calm, even in misinterpretation, the more people lean in. Curiosity grows in silence. Respect grows in restraint. When things fall apart, don't let your image fall with it. Let your calm become your armor. Let your silence become your message. Speak when it adds weight, act when it sets direction, and let others adjust to your presence, not the other way around. Because in the end, perception isn't just optics, it's influence. It's the difference between being seen as a leader or dismissed as a follower. And once you command how you're seen, you no longer need to demand power. You become it.
Number 2.
Act first, don't react. A leader sets the tempo. A victim tries to catch up. This is one of the most brutal but liberating truths you'll ever learn. If you're reacting, you're already behind. The person who speaks first, frames the situation, makes the first decision, automatically holds the narrative. They aren't waiting for permission, they're directing momentum, and that's where power lives, not in noise, but in initiation. The Stoics understood this deeply, Seneca wrote. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. But delay, in his view, wasn't hesitation. It was strategy. It was the space needed to choose a response, not just blurt a reflex. The Stoic approach to life was never passive, it was proactive. A wise person pauses not to freeze, but to seize. A leader delays just long enough to act deliberately. Then they go. They don't react impulsively, they initiate wisely. This is where many people fail. The victim mindset waits for the right time, waits for validation, waits for the perfect information, or for emotions to cool down. They live in constant reaction to circumstances, always adjusting, always justifying, always explaining. But when you're constantly reacting, you're not choosing. You're surrendering. You're being moved instead of moving things forward. Now contrast that with someone like Steve Jobs. He wasn't a technical genius, but he had one thing that most people don't: the ability to act first. He didn't wait for polls or trends to dictate action. He created products people didn't yet know they needed. The iPhone wasn't the result of a survey. It was the result of vision. He took the first step, and the world followed. And when others tried to compete or criticize, he didn't backpedal or defend. He acted again, first, then again, and again, until we. This same principle is found all over Stoic writing. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings by preparing for challenges, not avoiding them. Today you will meet people who are rude, arrogant, deceitful. He wrote, why say this? Not to poison his day, but to protect it, he was choosing to move first. Mentally, instead of waking up and letting the day shape him, he shaped the day. That is the core of Stoic practice. Anticipation is leadership. Reaction, by contrast, is dependency. If someone offends you and you immediately retaliate, they now control your emotional state. They have pushed a button and you performed. But when you pause, center yourself, and then speak or act from clarity, you become untouchable because you are no longer controlled. You are choosing your path forward. Oprah Winfrey mastered this during her rise. She was attacked publicly, mocked for her weight, challenged for her opinions, but she didn't spend time reacting to every critic. She didn't explain her worth. She initiated change. She launched her own network. She created space for conversations that didn't exist before. She didn't wait for a platform, she built it. And through that, she shifted from cultural figure to cultural force. The Stoics might describe this as living in accordance with nature. That is, being grounded, centered, and in harmony with reality, rather than being bounced around by it. They believed that wisdom was not just what you knew, but what you did with what you knew. That means stepping forward even when you're uncertain. That means taking the initiative, not because you're fearless, but because you've stopped asking for certainty. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about setting the tone. It's about creating the direction that others adjust to. Most people are waiting for an opportunity, for clarity, for confidence. But the secret is, none of those things come before action. They come through action. Confidence is a result, not a requirement. And this is why so many people remain stuck. They wait until they feel ready. But readiness is a myth. The Stoics rejected the idea of perfect timing. Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. You don't wait for alignment, you create alignment by moving. So how do you do this practically? You begin with framing. You wake up, and instead of reaching for your phone, you reach for your mind. You set your thoughts, you set your intentions. You decide, I will lead today. I will speak when it's right, not when I'm triggered. I will take action, not out of urgency, but out of purpose. Then you look at your schedule and identify one place, just one, where you've been waiting too long, and you make the first move. This might mean making a call you've been avoiding, ending a relationship that's draining you, starting a project that intimidates you. Whatever it is, the moment you act first, you shift the entire dynamic. You go from hoping to deciding, from needing to leading. Even in silence, you can act first. Sometimes choosing not to respond to provocation is the first move. Sometimes withdrawing your energy is the initiation. Power doesn't always look like activity. It looks like clarity. And when your actions come from that inner stillness, they carry far more weight than 100 rushed reactions. Because here's the deeper truth. Victims wait for rescue. Leaders become their own rescue. They don't ask for perfect conditions. They move in imperfect ones. They don't need all the answers. They just need the courage to start. And by doing that, they gain what everyone else is chasing. Momentum. You want power? Then stop reacting. Start moving. You want respect? Then stop explaining. Start deciding. You want freedom? Then stop waiting and act.
Number 3.
Master your emotions and use others. Power doesn't come from being emotionless. It comes from not being ruled by emotion. A true leader doesn't suppress how they feel. They study it. They view emotion the way a skilled navigator sees the sea. Waves may rise, storms may come, But with understanding and control, they guide their vessel forward without capsizing. Stoic mastery is not about coldness, it's about command. And the first battlefield is always within. Marcus Aurelius, burdened by loss, illness, and the responsibility of an empire, never once suggested that emotion was evil. What he warned against was the mind becoming a servant to feeling. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events, realize this, and you will find strength." This was not a motivational quote. It was survival instruction. In chaos, emotion screams for reaction. The leader, however, remained silent long enough to respond intelligently. Epictetus, born a slave and later a philosopher, taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by our interpretation of things. Meaning, emotion isn't just a reflex, it's a response we choose whether we realize it or not. The victim lets anger, anxiety, or sadness dictate their tone, their posture, their life. But the Stoic pauses. The Stoic names the emotion, holds it up to the light, and asks, "Is this useful now?" If not, they let it pass, without acting from it. This is why leadership is impossible without emotional control. Because if your inner world is always flinching, your outer decisions will be unstable. And the moment people sense you can be pushed emotionally, they'll start testing you, not out of cruelty, but out of curiosity. People unconsciously want to know, can I trust your center? If your mood swings based on theirs, they can't. But if your tone stays consistent, even when provoked, you become someone they respect. Now look at Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in concentration camps, stripped of everything but his breath. He still maintained this truth, that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our power. He wasn't preaching, he was practicing. Despite torture, humiliation, and despair, he held on to the one thing his captors could not take: his control over his own reaction. That is emotional mastery in its most raw form. That is Stoicism made flesh. And here's where most people go wrong. They confuse feeling with acting. They believe that if they feel rage, they must express it. If they feel anxious, they must retreat. But emotions are not commands. They are clues. They are signals, not shackles. And the leader uses them like instruments, not suppressing them, but not becoming them either. This balance is what Maya Angelou exemplified. She endured racial injustice, trauma, and public attack. Yet she carried herself with poise that silenced rooms. Her calm was not weakness, it was architecture, built from pain, but expressed as clarity. When she spoke, her words landed, not because they were loud, but because they were anchored. That's emotional power, when people feel your presence before they hear your opinion. And that's why Stoicism doesn't kill emotion. It disciplines it. It asks, does this emotion serve the moment? Does it clarify the problem or cloud it? Do I feel anger because a boundary has been crossed, or because my ego is bruised? These questions don't eliminate feeling, they refine it. Mastery also means studying emotion in others, not to manipulate, but to understand. When someone lashes out, a leader doesn't always fight back. They ask, what's beneath that reaction? Is it fear, insecurity, shame? And in seeing that, they gain leverage, not to dominate, but to diffuse. They steer the conversation, not because they talk over people, but because they're the only one not drowning in emotion. This is how leaders influence without force. They become fluent in emotional patterns, knowing when silence speaks louder than explanation, when patience cuts deeper than confrontation. They don't deny their emotions, they direct them, and by doing so, they train others to do the same. Practical mastery begins with space. When triggered, do nothing, yet breathe, Observe the feeling like a scientist. Watch its rise and fall. Once you name it, you separate from it. Then decide, will I speak from this emotion or wait for clarity? That space is your power, because once you delay the first impulse, you unlock your second response, the one built from wisdom, not reflex. This control over time becomes visible. In relationships, you don't escalate, you diffuse. In meetings, you don't interrupt, you absorb. In crisis, you don't panic. You become still, and people notice. They turn to you, not because you're loud, but because you're calm when others aren't. That is leadership. In negotiation, this is gold. The one who reacts first always loses power, but the one who listens, who waits, who controls the tempo, they win without aggression. They shape the mood of the room, not by force, but by gravity. That's what emotional mastery creates, influence without effort. And here's the deepest truth. Most people are loud because they feel unseen. Most people react because they feel unsafe. But the leader doesn't depend on validation. They validate themselves through control. And once you can sit with emotion without needing to discharge it, you gain something rare: freedom. You stop being readable, you stop being predictable, you become the storm in the eye inside it. So the next time emotion rises, pause, let it flood you, but don't act. Let it burn, but don't move. Stand inside it, feel everything, show nothing until it serves you. Because that's the difference between emotional chaos and emotional clarity. One reacts, the other rules.
Number 4.
Turn misfortune into momentum. A victim sees setbacks as punishment. A leader sees them as fuel. This is one of the most vital mindset shifts you will ever make. Not just for success, but for survival. Because suffering is inevitable. Rejection, betrayal, failure. None of us escape it. But the way you interpret your misfortune will either drain you or sharpen you. Either you say, "Why me?" or you say, "Watch me." And that choice makes all the difference. The Stoics never promised a life free of pain. In fact, they warned us to expect it. They didn't preach comfort. They prepared for discomfort. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." In that single line, he reframed pain as process, not punishment, but refinement. To the Stoic, misfortune was not the end of the path. It was the path. Marcus Aurelius embodied this. He ruled an empire in crisis. He buried children. He endured betrayal from those closest to him. Yet in his private journal, Meditations, he never painted himself as a victim. He saw every loss, every obstacle, every heartbreak as a chance to grow in virtue. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That was not poetic metaphor. It was a survival strategy. He understood that misfortune, when accepted and used, becomes momentum. This is what separates the victim from the leader. A victim narrates their pain into permanence. They define themselves by the wound. But a leader reframes the wound as a lesson, not to deny the pain, but to direct it. Because pain without direction becomes poison, but pain with purpose becomes power. Consider Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, humiliation, isolation, dehumanization. Yet when he walked free, he didn't unleash vengeance. He offered leadership. He didn't pretend prison hadn't shaped him. He used it. He built patience, clarity, and resolve in the fire of confinement. He came out forged, not fractured. That's what leaders do. They take what tried to break them and build from it. The Stoics would call this voluntary hardship. It's not just enduring what hurts. It's practicing discomfort before it arrives. It's choosing difficulty to strengthen the soul. Epictetus, once a slave, once beaten and broken, said, Difficulties show what men are, not because hardship makes you something new, but because it reveals what was already there. In hardship, you either break or you become undeniable. And most people, they break not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught how to reinterpret suffering. They think misfortune means something has gone wrong, but a Stoic thinks misfortune means something important is being revealed. Pain shows you where your expectations were inflated, where your ego was overgrown, where your faith in stability was misplaced, and in that exposure, if you're brave enough to face it, you find freedom. This isn't just theory. Look at Maya Moore, a WNBA champion at the peak of her career. She walked away from basketball to fight for justice, to free an innocent man from prison. She gave up fame and comfort for a painful, uncertain cause. And after years of struggle, she succeeded. But more than that, she returned to the game stronger, because she had allowed misfortune to refine her priorities. She didn't let difficulty steal her fire. She let it sharpen her aim. So how do you turn misfortune into momentum in your own life? First, accept it without decoration. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't dramatize it. Just say, this is where I am. The Stoics taught that acceptance is not surrender. It's control. When you stop resisting what happened, you begin redirecting what happens next. Second, interrogate the pain. What is it trying to show you? Is there a belief that failed? A boundary that was too loose? A fear that finally surfaced? When you mine misfortune for meaning, you don't erase the pain, but you make sure it wasn't wasted. Third, translate the pain into motion. Create from it, teach from it, speak from it, write from it. Let it fuel your practice, your discipline, your clarity. As the Stoics said, action is the antidote. Don't wait for healing to happen. Build while hurting, move before you feel ready. Look at someone like Howard Schultz, raised in public housing, his father injured, jobless, without benefits. Schultz watched his family suffer, and instead of folding under the weight of resentment, he vowed to build something different. Years later, as CEO of Starbucks, he pioneered healthcare for part-time workers. Not because it was easy, but because he turned childhood misfortune into modern policy. That is what it means to lead from pain, not with it. Even grief, even heartbreak, even public failure, none of it is final unless you let it be. A leader walks through it all with the belief that the meaning is not in the pain itself, but in the pattern they build after the pain. That's what separates the crushed from the reborn, the broken from the wise. You don't need to glorify your suffering, but you do need to claim it, not with bitterness, but with authorship. You get to decide, will this end you, or will this educate you? Will this reduce you, or will it rewire you? Will you be remembered for what happened to you, or for what you did with it? The Stoics believed that no external blow could define the soul. Only your response could do that. So the next time life punches you in the chest, don't collapse, don't perform, don't seek pity. Stand up slowly, breathe, and say, this is mine now. I will carry it, and I will build from it. You don't need to prove you're unbreakable. You just need to become someone who bends with pain, without losing shape. And in doing that, you become rare, because the person who can suffer deeply and still move forward moves with a force the world can't replicate. They don't wait for relief, they become the release. Most people will never realize they've handed their power away. Not in one grand moment, but in hundreds of silent choices, reacting instead of acting, complaining instead of creating, waiting instead of leading. But if you've made it this far, you're not most people. You've seen the truth that leadership isn't given. It's chosen, and it's not loud. It's deliberate. It begins in the mind, moves through discipline, and shows up in how you carry your scars. So take what hurt you, take what was unfair, take the betrayal, the failure, the silence, and turn it into clarity. not to prove anything to the world, but to become someone the world cannot shake. Because the moment you stop waiting for permission and start shaping your own momentum, you stop being a victim. You become a force, and the world will feel it without you having to say a word.